Hello again, people. Mary will be here with another video, and today we will continue the New Frontier Rewrite series. This is the third video on the topic, and I recommend you go watch the first two parts before watching this. If you didn't watch them, links will be in the description. Reminding you guys a little of what has happened in the previous parts. On episode 1, I had Clem and Javi meeting themselves in the slaughterhouse. They escape from there with the help of Trip and Conrad, and go to Prescott, meeting the community. There, we would make the choice of either going with Eleanor or Trip to the junkyard. Depending on each one you picked, the player would determine Mariana and Gabe's fate for future episodes. On episode 2, I made changes to the plot we have at Prescott, having Francine, who would be the leader in this new version, betraying the community and selling it to the New Frontier. Clementine would accidentally shoot Francine, murdering her, and she and Javi would be sentenced to hang in public. Before that happens, however, the New Frontier comes bursting the front gates, and we're forced to join the fight against them. Prescott would fall, and we'd head out to find Richmond to help Kate with her bullet injury. From here on out, the episode would play out similar to how it does, with us meeting Jesus, having the Conrad choice, and then having David's revealed by the Richmond gates. For the flashbacks on episode 1, I made even more outcomes for each of the endings you picked on season 2. And on episode 2 flashbacks, I made Clem join the New Frontier in many different occasions, and accompanied by many different people. She could enter alongside Mike, the family from the Jane ending, and with Kenny. If not, she would enter alone with AJ. If you're already a subscriber, I ask that you leave a like right now. And if you're not, you can wait until the end of the video to decide whether I deserve it or not. Now, let's get into it. Now, if you remember well from my previous video, I briefly stated my opinion about this episode already, but here I'll discuss more about it, saying specifically why I truly dislike this episode here, and why I prefer episodes 2 and 1 over this. People normally take this as their favorite episode of the season, basically because they answer questions players have been asking by this point of the story. But as I said, this here seems like to me, Telltale just had so many problems developing episodes 1 and 2, that they went for a safer route to execute this entry here. And a lot of that, for me, can be synthesized in how they introduce David's character to the plot. At the end of Ties That Bind Part 2, they raise the possibility that David may have been an authoritarian leader during the apocalypse, since he was apparently leading the New Frontier, people who raided other communities and murdered little children. But then, no, he actually isn't a murderer. Yes, he's kinda douche and all, but he magically isn't aware of what his own men have been doing outside the gates? He, who likes to be in action, to be on the field fighting and all? This just makes no sense to me whatsoever. In the beginning of the episode, Jesus suggests that David may have gone to the dark side during the quarantine scene. Potentially Clementine does too. And Kate's all terrified as well in the hospital, and oh hey, never mind. Sorry. Never mind what Kate said. I haven't really talked about her in my previous videos, have I? Well, while people normally hate Gabe, David, and Joan, I have to lay my hatred on Kate, guys. I mean, she's kinda decent on episodes 1 and 2, with the exception of the bullcrap flashback on episode 2. But on episode 3, she's just really obnoxious, making emotional games with Javi. Really, this here is the trait of a manipulative person.
People nearly killed me, Javi. David's people. Have you forgotten, Mari?
Of course not.
It's always been you and me on the road, Javi. That's how we've made it this far. Please, promise me we'll go back to that the first chance we get.
Not only that, but she's the center of this season's worst plot point ever. The love triangle stuff. And they even throw this at the end of the season as the climax of the entire story later in episode 5. She has a little redeem quality on the last episode, trying to save Richmond and all, but oh boy, the ride with her is pretty bumpy, and she's definitely my least favorite character ever. Starting things off, there would be a flashback, and no, it wouldn't be the one where they have in a game because I used it on episode 2. No, it wouldn't be the one where they play baseball, and by the gods, it wouldn't be the one where they argue at the kitchen. Instead, I'd put here the episode 5 flashback where Javi, David, and their father play dominoes together and they discover he has cancer. This flashback is actually good. People don't often appreciate it that much, but here we have a really touching moment with his father, who we only saw as a walker in episode 1, and the dialogues are pretty well written, not gonna lie. But I feel that bringing it on the last episode, as the game does already, really harms the story, so I'm pulling it here to episode 3. The scene is nice and all, but the most important thing would be to settle a Javi and David moment, determining better their relationship right before the scene where they meet each other at the Richmond gates. So, beginning the episode, we would be at the gates, just after we had the revelation that David was a part of the New Frontier. If Clementine was at the scene, she and David could exchange a few nasty looks, and Clem could also be very shocked to discover they were brothers. David would take Kate to the hospital alongside Gabe/Mari, and we'd quickly be thrown to quarantine. Here, there would actually be a sort of bureaucratic process, taking their weapons away, checking them for bites, asking them a few questions, and then they'd be thrown into a cell to find Eleanor already there. They would have basically the same conversation as they have in a game, talking about the fact that the people in Richmond are New Frontier, and that David and Javi are brothers. Conrad and Clem would have similar interactions as the one they do already, but maybe they could make Clem feeling more afraid, like she was feeling on episode 2 instead of just angry. Also making the comment about David not being a good person. Tripp also makes a good statement about Prescott, probably the only time he's remorseful and angry about what happened to his community. And he'd be really willing to avenge its destruction. David would show up and we'd accompany him to see Kate in the hospital. On our way there, we'd talk to David about the horrible things that we've witnessed. About the slaughterhouse, about Gabe/Mari dying, Kate getting shot, and Prescott being overrun. Ultimately throwing all of that on a New Frontier's checkbook. David would say he knew nothing about this, and we'd quickly meet Ava like we're at do. David would be really mad about everything that happened, especially with his family, but he'd also want to keep a low profile in front of other people, and this wouldn't be different here with Ava. Also, if you brought Clem along to Richmond, we could ask him about what happened between her and the New Frontier, and David would give a vague answer to him. We would enter the hospital to find Kate and Gabe/Mari there. David would interact with both his kids in different ways. Kate would pretend being in pain, only to tell us that the place felt a bit wrong to her. But she wouldn't be all like, oh hey, let's go back to the road, you and me, and all of that really silly shit. The doctor would come in to treat Kate, but it wouldn't be Lingard. Remember, in the episode 2 video, I made Joan to be the doctor instead of Lingard. Both characters would basically have switched roles for this new version I'm making. So here Joan would come in, examine Kate for a while, and compliment the procedures that were made on the injury. We would mention we had a lady doctor with us, and Joan would tell them to get her out of the cell. We'd head back to the cell and bring Eleanor along with us. Getting there, Eleanor and Joan would be shocked to meet each other. So, yeah. I want you now to pay close attention to both of these characters for a second. Yeah, right? Their faces, they're really physically alike, aren't they? Well, can you guess? Yes, That's because Joan was originally supposed to be Eleanor's mom. I am not joking. That would make Eleanor's betrayal on episode 4 so much more believable. But no, this thing actually makes sense. Of course Telltale just had to cut it out. I mean, why, right? Gosh, man, this here just depresses me as hell. Remember in my season 2 videos I said that Mike and Ralph should have been a unique character, or even when Arvel's role should have been played by Eddie? Yeah, now try multiplying it by 10 and you'll know how I feel about this change they made. Just really, Telltale? Really? Why? Anyway, both of them would meet each other and have a warm reunion. Everyone would be surprised, yes, and they would mention that Eleanor was a med student before everything happened. I find it a really believable setting to put a mother-daughter relationship, one who's a doctor and the other who wanted to follow on her footsteps. Maybe a coincidence that both Eleanor and Javi have family on the New Frontier, but I think that's a contrivancy we can get past on. There would be a big conversation, mainly with the relatives catching up, and Joan and David saying how their community worked, mentioning Lingard, Clint, and the counts of their once Richmond. Eleanor would mention she was from Prescott, and Joan and David would feel sad, acting like they didn't know about the attack. With their conversation over, we'd had to meet the council. Also, on this conversation, I find it a good opportunity to make Joan thinking that Eleanor is onto Javi, and David think that Javi's onto Eleanor. Just little thing that kind of connects with the fact that they were hitting on each other in episode 1 and just never gets mentioned again. Anyway, when meeting the council, Clint would basically be his own self from the original version, the guy who runs crops and food production, and Lingard would be the guy who ran the outside world, deals with communities and all that. We'd have a passive-aggressive conversation with them, kind of like the conversation where I had with Clint and Joan, until the point it hits a crescendo, with Max and Lonnie coming into the scene and exposing Javi to them with real crime accusation. Yes, real crime accusations. Not just siphoning some gas, which we didn't know it was theirs. Not shooting our kidnapper in the back, a choice that it is determinant, and of course, eating a few puddings. Here, Max would expose us with all the bad we've done, shooting Lonnie's ear, creating a mess at the slaughterhouse, being allies with the people from Prescott, who were at war with them, and also exchanging a lot of bullets outside the gates, in the junkyard on episode 1, and at Prescott on episode 2. We could also make our point, saying all of the bads the New Frontier did to us, locking us away, killing our nephew/niece, and all the deal they made with Francine to sell Prescott to their attack. Lingard would be furious to hear all this, and would send us to our cell immediately, stating that they should carry out our sentence with the presence of the people. We'd head back to the cell with David alongside us. We'd here discover that David was aware of the raids and the authoritarianism all along, but he would state that he would do everything in his power to make us live, and also protect Kate and Gabe/Maury. Here the player could rent on David for his position, or accept it and go along. Here we could even throw on his face that he was the cause that Gabe/Maury died. So, remember they had all those expansion projects they mentioned a bit on these episodes? So, the cell they were being held captive would be on this expansion part, and a few walkers would quickly break in after we got there. The action scene would be quick, but I decided to put this here to fill a bit of the episode with action, since I'm proposing this episode to be way more talking and meeting new people and places than action-packed stuff. If Clementine wasn't with us the whole time, she'd appear only by now, with people throwing her on the cell with them. Clem would explain how she was caught and talking about the herd of walkers coming in close. Here, we would brief her on everything that happened so far. Either way, here would be the place where Clem has her flashback, and it would also have a few variations depending on the choices you've made on Season 2 and on the flashbacks from episodes 1 and 2, even though the essence of each flashback would be the same. So, if you pick the Jane ending and let the family get in the compound of Season 2, we would have gotten out of house with the family after Jane committed suicide, and we joined the New Frontier with Clint offering us and the family some food. Clem and the family occasionally would discover the New Frontier's brutal way of life, and the family would plan to leave from their grasp. Clem says it's too dangerous to try doing anything rash that night. The family steals a bit of food and supplies and try running away regardless. The family is discovered in the middle of their escape, and Patricia and Gil, the mother and son, die during the New Frontier's approach on them. Randy and Clem would be brought before Lingard, and there Randy would pay for his crimes with his life, with David pulling the trigger. Thus Clem is taken to the slaughterhouse for hiding the truth from them, being also separated from AJ in the process. If you only shot Arvo in self-defense in the Alone flashbacks, we would join the New Frontier while meeting Joan, and after that, Mike would be one of the operatives on their army of raids, until one day he would abstain from his duty and he and Clem would decide to run away. Once again being brought upon Lingard, Mike would pay with his life and would be sent to the slaughterhouse with AJ once more being taken away from us. With Kenny, after we witnessed the destruction of Wellington, we would meet Lingard and join the New Frontier, only to discover on a certain day that the New Frontier was the one behind Wellington's attack all along. Kenny gets crazily enraged when getting to know it, and would try to escape with both Clem and AJ. The New Frontier guys would bring us to Lingard, and he starts beating Kenny. This is pure fan service, but hear me out. After being beat, Kenny would say something like, "I've taken worse beating in life," referencing Carver's beat up and his speech on Season 2 Episode 4 about always taking a beating. Just badass Kenny, man. Without anything left to do, Lingard would tell David to kill him, and he would. We'd also be sent to the slaughterhouse, and yes, having AJ being taken away from us. If you denied the family in the Jane ending, and if you murdered Arvo on the Episode 1 flashback, you joined the New Frontier with Ava, kinda like it already happens in the Episode 2 flashback. Right here, Clementine would have been a part of the community for a longer time, and she'd even help a bit of the community's bitings, and during one of these days, the flashback would take place, which I think would be the longest one out of the 4. We'd be on a mission with Ava, David, and Max. Things would be really okay between us. Clem could talk about AJ, Lee, and events from past seasons to them. Ava could mention her time in the army with David, and David himself could mention his family a bit, including Javier himself. You know, creating sort of a bond between these 3 characters. But then, we'd be faced with the objective of the day, to violently raid a camp of survivors and set the place for the arrival of Lingard and the other fellow members of the community. We would fight with them until the point where Clem finds a mother holding a child and she freezes, sparing them because of her bond to AJ. This mistake, however, on her part causes the death of a few of their New Frontier companions and leave others hurt. When Lingard arrives, he gets mad at Clem, and he forces her to kill one of the remaining survivors in a sort of torture. Lingard gives the word, and David holds AJ by his feet, threatening to kill him in case we deny killing the innocent person. Thus Clem is forced to kill the survivor and is sent to the slaughterhouse, with AJ being taken away from her once more. The council will call in the trial to judge Javier, Clementine, Tripp, Jesus, and the terminally Conrad for their crimes against the community. Eleanor, Kate, and Gabe/Maury would be out of the trial since Joan and David would vouch for the three of them. However, we would briefly talk to them before the trial. They would simply be devastated with the fact that we're on a trial, and they'd fear for our well-being. So there would actually be some sort of jury on us, a court, a judge, pretty similar to civilization, as the council's intentions were all along. The accusations would come and go, pointing out that we were from a rival community, pointing out that we caused the chaos inside the slaughterhouse, that we killed some of them on the junkyard and at Prescott Gates, and every single one of the accused would have had a chance to plead on each of the accusations. Tripp would make a speech about Prescott's destruction in the form of protest, tying to his earlier speeches about it, both on episode 2 and 3. Jesus would point out that they ruthlessly occupied Richmond, and if Conrad was in there, he'd say something about Francine, telling they corrupted her mind to sell the community out. Witnesses would also come to the scene. I thought of Max, Lonnie, and Badger getting in and numbering the things we did. I imagined that on Badger's turn, he'd lie about us stealing the gas from their van and shooting on him and his friends on the junkyard, and because of this, we'd be really furious with him, making us want to kill him so badly. The jury would go on each of the characters, sentencing them to different things. Tripp, Jesus, and Conrad, if he made it this far, would be sentenced to work compulsively on the expansion project, and Javier's fate would be determined by how well you defend yourself against the accusations on you, and you'd end up with two possible sentences: working an expansion project alongside Tripp and Jesus, or being exiled, kinda like it happens in an original episode already. I thought of maybe David getting in the scene and subtly vouching for us, showing that despite everything, he's still looking out for us. But then, things would come to a crescendo when it's Clementine's turn to be sentenced. She'd be the last, and out of all the characters, she'd be the one with the biggest crime list on her back. But when it comes the time for her to defend herself, she solely asks the Lingard and David something like, "Did you kill him? Did you kill AJ?" The crowd would go crazy, wanting to know what happened, who was AJ, and what was going on. Feeling the need to give a proper response to the people, Lingard just stares at David. Then reluctantly, David says, "Yes." That would of course be a lie, since if AJ died in A&F, there would be no final season. But just imagine you playing this season for the first time back in 2017 and facing yourself with a revelation of sorts. I don't know, I personally would have flipped, no joke. So yes, the episode would finish with a massive cliffhanger, and the player would be left wondering what was gonna happen next. So, bottom lining everything, I've changed things inside Richmond to make the council work better with this new rewrite I'm proposing. Also changing Eleanor's and Joan's relation to a mother-daughter dynamic. Of course, for Clementine, again I put more flashback variations, depending on your choices from Season 2 and previous flashbacks, still referencing a bit of what happens already in the episode, having Clementine being separated from AJ, and being sent to the slaughterhouse in all of the occasions. For David, wow, I just really put him in a tight spot here, because by giving him a proper character treatment, I introduced him to a guilt trip for having, in a way, caused the death of his own son-daughter, and seen his own brother unfairly suffering for it. Not only that, but in the flashback he complied with the murder of many characters, including Kenny and AJ, as it would be supposed to be believed. Because of this, I really think he'd just be the most hated character ever in the series. Just please don't flay the guy alive just yet. He messed up big time, yes, but there would be still room in episodes 4 and 5 to make these new character nuances to be explored and, if not, subverted for a greater good.
Hardy fucking ha.
Anyway, I know it has been a long time since I posted my last video, and I truly apologize for it. I was just caught up in a lot of end of the year things, and I'll be back in pace in no time. For that, I'll be sure to post part 4 in a smaller period of time. Thank you a lot if you made it here. Don't forget to give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and to leave a comment on what you think of the changes I've made. I really appreciate when you leave your thoughts down below. Thank you a lot, and see you when I see you.
Hardy fucking ha.